So let's understand Nigeria's debt history properly. So that when the Chinese come and eventually start picking us up for factory shifts, you and I will not say we did not know. Because with the pace at which this administration is borrowing, we have to recognize speed when we see one. So let's begin. Before Bola Ahmed Tinubu came into power in 2023, Nigeria's debt stood at about 87 trillion. But then let's go back further under Muhammadu Buhari. Muhammadu Buhari came into power in 2015 and Nigeria's debt stood at 12 trillion naira. And fast forward to 2023 when Muhammadu Buhari handed over power to Bola Ahmed Tinubu. As previously mentioned, our debt rose to 87 trillion naira. That is to say, roughly 75 trillion naira borrowed in 8 years. Now, you might have to hold that thought because we are going somewhere. So, fast forward till now, that's about 2 to 3 years under Tinubu. Our debt has moved from 87 trillion naira to over 153 trillion naira, and it is now projected towards 195 trillion. That is to say, Tinubu has accumulated so far 60 trillion naira added to his record in real time. But note, he hasn't yet caught up with Buhari. But with the pace at which he's going, it definitely will. So, Buhari in 8 years accumulated 75 trillion naira. Tinubu in 2 to 3 years has accumulated 60 trillion naira increase in debt. Now, the issue is not just the borrowing. The speed of the borrowing is the main issue. This government has borrowed from any source money is. They've borrowed from the World Bank and other multilateral lenders. They've borrowed from China, Japan, France, United Kingdom, Abu Dhabi banks, and even within Nigeria through bonds. But now, for every borrowing, there's a reason. Why is the government borrowing? The government are borrowing for different reasons. Reasons like infrastructure, power, agriculture, social support after subsidy. Now, I'd love you to hold that thought because we'll come back to that. And yes, all this sounds quite interesting. Now, this is also important and most times we neglect it, and I'd love to mention it. Not all the increase you're seeing is fresh borrowing. About 22.7 trillion naira was old money already taken from central bank, and now the Nigerian government has turned it into official debt. Now let's understand this. So it's like borrowing money from somebody unofficially, and the person now says, "Oh, this wasn't written down. Let us write this down formally so we can have a formal agreement." So the debt did not just increase, it was also repackaged and formalized. And to also mention that this 22.7 trillion naira was actually accumulated during the time of Muhammadu Buhari. So if you need to add that to the 75 trillion naira accumulated, that will probably take us to about 97 trillion naira under Buhari. And that is my own calculation. So they might argue that the reason for this increase is due to the exchange rate. But that is valid. But the question remains, who is responsible for this exchange rate? And the most disturbing aspect of this borrowing is not the borrowing itself, but the fact that some of these monies are borrowed for debt servicing. So Nigeria is spending over 15.5 trillion just to service debts. That is the money Nigeria has to pay every year just to keep our debt alive. Now, this is not to reduce the debt, let alone to finish it. This is the money Nigeria must pay to stay afloat. So let's say, for example, you borrowed money from someone and you have to pay interest monthly. So the actual money Nigeria is borrowing still stays there. But this payment is to ensure that Nigeria's debt stays serviced. Now let's come back to what I told you earlier. Remember I said you should hold a thought. Now they said the reason for this borrowing was for social support after subsidy. That is to say that before Bola Ahmed Tinubu thought of removing subsidy, he knew quite well that there would be increased hardship. So the reason of this money was to provide support. It was to provide relief programs. It was to help cushion economic shock. That is what they promised. But let me ask you, have you seen the support? Have you felt the relief? And more importantly, let's argue this way. What was the logic behind removing subsidy only to borrow money to cushion the same hardship the removal had created? So at the end of the day, think about it this way. Subsidy is removed, cost of living is increased, debt servicing increased, debt also increased. And the question remains, Where is the relief? Because at the end of the day, you're not just paying for the subsidy removal, you're actually also paying for the social support loan borrowed. It is a truth at a time. Take care and have a nice day.